It's hard to wrap our heads around people actually living in total isolation this day and age, without internet, phones, or television, but as fascinating as it is to look at images of these tribes living the way our ancestors did hundreds and thousands of years ago, it's important and ethical for their way of life to be respected, which means leaving them the hell alone. And we're starting off with the Sentinelese tribe, who live on North Sentinel Island in the Bay of Bengal. This is often referred to as the most dangerous island on Earth. Not only is it wrong to intrude on someone else's home for ethical reasons, but here it's also very dangerous. The Sentinelese are known to be very protective of their land, and people have met unfortunate ends after getting too close. The island is completely off limits to outsiders, but there's a recent case involving a man named John Allen Chow, who was a Christian missionary, part of an organization called All Nations. He trekked out to North Sentinel Island in 2018 with the goal of converting the tribe to Christianity, and seeing as I'm referring to him in past tense, it's pretty clear things did not end well for him. He began getting closer and closer to the island over a period of a few days, offering fish as an attempt to make a peaceful contact with them, but each time he would get close, he'd end up needing to retreat. At one point, a young tribesman even shot an arrow at him, which would have pierced Chow's chest if his Bible hadn't blocked it. Now, Chow saw this as a sign to keep pressing forward, and he made one final attempt the next day, telling the fisherman he was traveling with to leave him behind. And that was the last time he was seen alive. The fisherman later saw his body being dragged along the shore by members of the tribe. Next on the list we have Amazon tribes in Brazil. This image here was taken in 2008. It's pretty amazing. Clearly see three tribespeople, two who are pointing arrows right at the camera. This image, as well as many others, were taken as part of a project carried out by the National Indian Foundation, part of the Brazilian government, involved in the policies relating to uncontacted indigenous people. An uncontacted tribes expert named Jose Carlos do Reyes Morales Jr. made a statement about these images, which were captured near the Javari River Valley, stating, "We did the overflight to show their houses, to show they are there, to show they exist." He also discussed how these tribes are under threat from illegal loggers in Peru, going on to say, "What is happening in this region of Peru is a monumental crime against the natural world, the tribes, the fauna, and is further testimony to the complete irrationality with which we, the civilized ones, treat the world." And now we move on to Peru to discuss the Mashco-Piro tribe, also known as the Nomole. Nomole, couldn't find a proper pronunciation of that, but the term Mashco translates to wild or savage, so definitely a more respectful term, which loosely means brothers and sisters or kin. They're a hunter-gatherer tribe that lives in the Manu National Park in Peru. They've actively avoided contact with outsiders for a long time, and there have been cases of violent conflicts with people who have tried to encroach on their territory, like the death of a local guide named Nicholas Flores. He was found with a bamboo-tipped arrow in his heart, and it's believed that the members of the Nomole tribe were responsible. Now, around 2011, the tribe began being spotted a bit more often, reaching out to missionaries, tourists, and other locals for assistance. They started asking for food and tools, which puts the Peruvian government in a bit of a tough spot. It's important to remember that uncontacted people like this are very vulnerable, as they haven't built up the immunities we have to like all the diseases and illnesses that are common anywhere outside of their isolated communities. Next, we have the Toromona of Bolivia. This is an uncontacted tribe that lives in the upper Madidi and Heath rivers. In 2016, there were reports of encounters between workers involved in an oil exploration near the Peruvian border and this uncontacted tribe. The Bolivian State Oil Company, which had subcontracted the exploration work to BGP Bolivia, a subsidiary of a Chinese oil corporation, denied having these encounters at first. In August and September of 2016, workers clearing tracks through the forest started coming across footprints, broken branches, and empty tortoise shells, all showing there were people living out there. Then on September 17th, workers were surprised when they heard shouts from people nearby. BGP postponed work in the area and withdrew the workers. Then, a couple nights later, workers in their camp were surrounded by tribesmen believed to be from the same uncontacted group. And another indigenous group called the Takana, who also live in the region, had previously warned against oil exploration, saying that it was a threat to the then uncontacted Toromona, but the president of the Bolivian State Oil Company denied the existence of an uncontacted tribe, stating, "The facts have been twisted. We will carry on with our work." This oil exploration would involve cutting hundreds of tracks through the forest and more than 61,000 small underground explosions in the Amazon's uncontacted frontier. With all the noise and workers, there was a very real risk of unplanned contact, not to mention encroaching on their home and endangering very vulnerable people. Again, exposing them to even common illnesses and diseases like the flu and measles could have killed them. Next on the list, we head back to Brazil to talk about the Korubo. This tribe has also been known to be very territorial, but for good reason. This indigenous tribe lives in the western Amazon basin. They choose to live in total isolation from the modern world. Their Portuguese name translates to clubbers because their preferred weapon is the club. FUNAI, Brazil's Agency for Indigenous Affairs, are the only group to have successfully made peaceful contact with the Korubo. They first tried in 1972, but that failed, and they stopped trying for a while after 7 of their workers died. But in 1996, they finally made some headway. The Korubo's main tribe, which is about a few hundred strong, separated from a smaller group, and is still in complete isolation. But the smaller band have interacted with neighboring settlements and FUNAI employees over the years. FUNAI assists the tribe, giving them immunization shots and regular checkups. They've also established a national park to protect the Korubo's land from logging. Their goal is to preserve the tribe's way of life. Next on the list are the Awa, who have had a lot of issues with loggers. There are about 350 members of this tribe, and around 100 have zero contact with the outside world. Just like with all the tribes on this list, their isolation is very important to them, helping them avoid conflicts that have historically messed things up for them. And back in the 19th century, European settlers began clearing out their land, so the Awa were forced out of their land, becoming mostly nomadic. Fast forward to the 80s, some Awa moved to government settlements, but some have stuck to their traditional lifestyle, relying on their forest for everything they need. But in 1982, the Brazilian government got a massive loan, and part of the deal here was protecting the lands of certain indigenous groups, including the Awa. This was crucial because their forests were being invaded by outsiders, and the tribe was in danger of disappearing completely. Now, it took the Brazilian government a whopping 20 years to actually do something about it, but thanks to pressure from groups like Survival International, the Awa's land was officially marked as theirs in 2003. Sadly though, at that point their population had dropped pretty significantly because of encroachment and massacres. In 2011 things got even darker when illegal loggers burned a young member of the tribe alive who had wandered out of her village. This had been a warning to other indigenous groups. Between 2003 and 2010, around 450 indigenous people were killed, and investigators found loggers wrecking Awa camps. The Awa are facing the fastest deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon. Moving on to Ecuador now, we have the Tagaeri. This is one of 2 Guarani tribes that currently live in the Ecuadorian Amazon basin. Back in 1968, this group separated from the Guarani families because they didn't want to accept the influence of missionaries, and since then they've had minimal contact with the outside world and even other Waorani groups. In the 90s, some Waorani groups moved westward to escape some of the stuff going on that was encroaching on their land, like petroleum exploration and logging, and the Tagaeri were one of those groups. And they're very protective of their way of life. They do not put up with outsiders trying to encroach on them. They've attacked missionaries and anyone they see as threats to their isolation, and power to them. The tribe is very small. Of course, it's hard to say exactly how many there are, but it's estimated there's only about 20 to 30 members. Back to Brazil once again. Now we have the Kawahiva. The Kawahiva people are an uncontacted indigenous tribe in Brazil living in the Rio Pardo region of Mato Grosso. It's estimated that there are at least 4 bands of uncontacted Kawahiva with around 15 individuals in the region. This tribe is mostly nomadic, and they're very rarely seen even by other indigenous groups. Most of what's seen from this tribe is just stuff they leave behind, like arrows, baskets and hammocks, sleeping mats. There are concerns that loggers intentionally keep them on the run, and there have been laws put forward to try and protect the tribe, like the Rio Pardo Indigenous Area designated in 2001. Legal protection has often been ignored, unfortunately, in the past, but there were arrests made in 2005. Businessmen, loggers, and squatters were found encroaching on the Kawahiva's land, but no one was ever tried. Legal protection was reinstated in 2007 and then intensified in 2012, creating an official reservation with more protective laws put in place. Next on the list we have the Ayoreo. Now, most of this tribe now has contact with the outside world, but there is still a small group living in total isolation. There are around 100 uncontacted Ayoreo people, divided into 6 to 7 groups. 3 of these groups are in the northern region of the Gran Chaco, along the border of Bolivia and Paraguay, and the other 3 to 4 groups are in the southern region of the territory. The biggest threats to these isolated groups are cattle farming and deforestation, the sale of their territory, searches for oil, and missionaries who want to enforce their beliefs on them. There are officially laws that grant the tribe the right to own their own land that they live on, preventing people from entering or selling it, but their land still gets redistributed. Some landowners will deny that there are tribes living there. And finally, we have the many uncontacted tribes living in the remote rainforests of West Papua. Now, unlike uncontacted tribes in Brazil, who have government protection, with groups like Funai, for example, there is no government protection in place for these tribes in West Papua. The human rights organization Survival International is one of the only groups petitioning to get laws in place to protect these tribes, wanting to raise awareness of their existence to help prevent encroachment on their land. At the same time, though, they also think it's important to keep details a bit vague, like their exact location and number of tribespeople. This can hopefully help prevent groups like missionaries from seeking them out. Now, with all that said, I've been your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.